que também é interessante é que se fala, como disseste, foi falado ontem, né, de internacionalização e nós olhando por fora. Mas, na verdade, a sua presença aqui é um lado muito interessante, muito produtivo da internacionalização, ou seja, que é uma internacionalização vinda de dentro, você assim, seu trabalho é um trabalho super reconhecido do ponto de vista internacional, é assim, é, uma coisa muito importante. Então, obrigado, deixo com o Roberto e deixo com você.
Obrigado, Federico.
Obrigado, Federico. So now we have to switch to English because this is a global class officially. So welcome everybody, Leandro, Guilherme, Andrea Fonseca, Fernando Augusto, and of course, welcome to Jelson Oliveira, who is our guest today, and we are already seeing his screen. So this wonderful presentation on one of his recent, maybe his most recent research topic, which is plants, animals, and human beings. So we can, in order to present Jelson to our students today, we can start from the end and then go backwards. This research interest was developed by Jelson, I think last year in a postdoc he attended in Louvain-la-Neuve, whose origins date back to his former interest in Hans Jonas. And by the way, this is the reason for which I am also here. So belonging to this group of researchers on Hans Jonas and related issues. So here are some of the, in Jelson's presentation, plants, animals, human beings, and of course the environmental threat, which is also related to the technological threat, which is another focus of Jelson's research. So in order to present Jelson beyond his titles, academic titles, so his graduation in philosophy, but also, if I remember well, in sociology specialization.
Just a specialization.
Exactly. And then the PhD. So beyond this, I would like to focus on his research interests, which are very many actually, but they have a common focus on ethical issues. So they revolve around ethical issues, but with a sensitivity to ontological issues, to the ontological background. And so in this case of his presentation today, we have the background of the environmental worry, which is related to the technological threat. But one of Jelson's, I think one of his last books was on negation and power, Negação e Poder. So in this book, he dealt with this problem, but from a technological point of view, which had a societal impact. So we all have in mind the complexity of these issues. And so Jelson is a researcher who is capable of focusing on specific issues at one time, but without forgetting the overall background. So this is one of the assets of his thinking, beyond the fact that he is also very clear in his writings and in his statements. And so he also has a societal impact. He contributes to newspapers, podcasts, and so he is carrying out an incredible job popularizing philosophy. But, you know, there are different ways of popularizing philosophy. There is the one that only simplifies for a wider audience. And then there is Jelson's style, which is capable of explaining complexity to everybody. So this is another point of another asset. But going backwards, so from this issue to Hans Jonas to the issue of technology, we have to go back to the origins of Jelson's interest in philosophy, who is Friedrich Nietzsche. And so this helps understanding and putting in perspective many of these proposals. And back to the current issue, this topic he will present today is a groundbreaking topic in current research, in interdisciplinary research, so biology, philosophy, politics, ethics, plants, animals, and human beings. So thank you so much for being with us today. And I leave you the floor for your presentation and then the discussion with the students and with the personnel. So thank you so much, Jelson.
Thank you, Roberto. I never heard so many, so beautiful things about myself. So thank you so much. I will remember forever about these words. Thank you so much. I'm not, of course, how can I say? I have to disagree with you. Is my work, my research is just one kind of how can I say, approximation of philosophy, as you, as Federico, as a lot of colleagues here in PUCPR. So thank you so much for your invitation to be here. I will try to present you a speech trying to connect these three, how can I say, three kinds of life. This is the question. Three kinds of understanding the relationship between plants, animals. I have to say non-human animals and human animals. It means my intention here is to show you how we can understand the relationship between these three kinds of life, of being, of living being, and to take some conclusions or some how can I say, some issues or how can I say, problems of this relationship. So my aim here is just to make this connection between these three kinds of life. So I will start, of course, with Nietzsche. So just a minute. Yes, because if I have to say if I have to say a word about my research today, I could say that my research is around the problem of nihilism in our culture, in our society. And for me, nihilism, of course, is a kind of concept that you can use to describe our situation in terms of our existential situation and even our society, how can I say, social existence and ecological existence as well. For me, including Hans Jonas' work is, we can understand the philosophy of Hans Jonas connecting the 3 or 4 parts of his work: the gnosis, the philosophy of life, the ethical perspectives, even the theological perspectives in turn around this problem of nihilism. And Jonas, you know, is a very interesting, how can I say, he was very interesting in Nietzsche's philosophy. He gave courses about the philosophy of Nietzsche in Ottawa and after in New York. So for me, the problem of Jonas was as well the problem of nihilism in our culture, and how to deal with this problem, how to deal with this concept in our culture. That's why we can say, for instance, that the phenomenon of life, the book published by Jonas in 1966, is a kind of response of answer to this problem in terms of ontology. And after, we can say that the responsibility principle, the principle of responsibility is another kind of response, another how can I say, another kind of tentative to deal with this problem. So for me, it's interesting to think when we are speaking about life or about plants or animals, that Nietzsche has this metaphor about nihilism in the desert. The idea of desertification of our world is interesting, because Nietzsche says that the desert is part of the system of nihilism. If you think, for instance, about the agriculture system or the destruction of the forest, or for instance, the extinction of animals and plants in our world, we can describe this situation with this word desertification. It means desert is part of this empty, this gap of values of the life. So just to quote Nietzsche in this book, Dionysius Dithyrambius, he wrote, "The desert grows, to him who harbors deserts. Stone crunches on stone, the desert the desert swallows and croaks and chokes. The hill death stares, burning and brown, and crews. His life is his crewing. Don't forget, man consumed by lust. You are the stone, the desert. You are death." It means that we can say that man is part of this system of construction, the desertification of the world. And the nihilism is not another thing than a process that starts with the man, the empty of the life, the sense of the life, or the meaning of the life, or the, how can I say, the objective of the life. And then man started to, how can I say, to explore the world, because of this empty. I wrote in my book, Negação e Poder, about the interpretation of Jonas and Heidegger of this concept of will to power. That's a very important concept in Nietzsche's philosophy. That means that the will to power is, in fact, will to technology. Will to power is another word that, including Jonas, used to express this, how can I say, the situation that man in the world, without the meaning of life, without the how can I say, the knowledge about what is the life and where is the sense of the meaning of his life. So he started to explore the world, and using technology, using the power that which he constructed in the last, I don't know, 3 or 4 centuries. So technology is part of the system, the nihilistic system, and the result of this system is the desertification of the world. Desertification is to think about desert, is to think about the death of the life, to think about a place without life. And even if you think in the Bible, for instance, in the Bible, Fonseca could help us, but in the Bible, how can I say, experience of the Exodus, for instance, you remember that Moses was walking during, I don't know, 40 years in the desert without God. So the idea of desert is the idea that God is not there, because God is the symbol of life. So if you think about the nihilistic situation, is the same situation of this kind of experience in the desert that Moses and the people of God had. Because, of course, the desert or the nihilism is another word to express the death of God, the death of God. That's a very important concept in this discussion in Nietzsche's philosophy, even in Heideggerian philosophy or in Jonasian philosophy as well. So to think about nihilism is to think about the empty of life, the empty of meaning of life, and even about the death of God. So another just to make my, how can I say, my framework of this speech. The first one is this kind of ideas that I can borrow from Nietzsche. And another thing is if you think about Plato and Phaedro, special, the prologue of Phaedro, there is a very interesting, how can I say, a very interesting quotation that we can understand why philosophy during the last, I don't know, 18th centuries have had forgot the question of nature, and special the question about animals, and more special the question about plants. Plants are very, how can I say, they don't believe, they don't remember the plants in our last interest in philosophy. It means philosophy forgot to speak about plants. When you read, for instance, a lot of books about philosophy, it's very common that there is no words about plants even when they are speaking about life in general, or the environmental problems, or the problem of nature, the philosophy of nature. Of course, there is some exception, but in general, there is no words about plants, for instance. And this is a very ancient tradition. We can find this in Plato. So when Phaedro and Socrates, they are speaking. If you remember, the prologue started that Socrates was speaking that they have to walking around how can I say, outside the city, not inside of the city. They are walking the nature. And in the end of this text, we can read this quotation that for me is very interesting, that reveals that nothing there is nothing to learn from nature, instead, because the place of philosophy is the city. It means the place of philosophy is always the human system, the intra-human system. And not we have nothing to learn from, for instance, flowers, plants, animals. And Socrates says, if you are indulgent with me, my good friend, he's speaking with Phaedro, don't you see that my desire is to learn? As philosopher, my desire is always to learn. And that being so, the countryside and the trees can teach me nothing, unlike the man in the city. It means if you have to learn, if you have to make philosophy, you have to forget trees and everything linked to countryside. We have to just to focus in the man and in the city. If you remember Jonas, when Jonas spoke about this, wrote about this in the first page of the imperative of responsibility, Jonas remember us that to make ethics is always, until now, is always to focus on the city, because the city is the place where, for instance, men have problems between them, And so the ethics are focused in these problems. Don't lie, don't kill, don't, I don't know, this kind of problems we have when you think in the life of man into the city. And the nature, the trees, the flowers, the animals are not problem for us. It means are not problems for nature, and not problem. Sorry, not problem for ethics. Are not ethics issues. You wanna say that nature was how can I say? Neutral in the point of view of ethics. So we understand that Phaedro and Socrates in Phaedro are starting a very, very strong current or very strong way to think philosophy and to make philosophy in until our times. Just to finish the quotation, but it seems to me that you have discovered the remedy that can make me live. It means the question is, Phaedro find finally a place, I don't know, in under a very nice tree, and they decided to be there, to stay there, to make a break in the, how can I say, the very complicated life between the men in the city. And then they decided to be there. That's why Socrates recognized that they discover the remedy, the medicine to make him live, to make him happy, or to make him, how can I say, live to think. Is it not by waving a leaf branch or a piece of fruit in front of the animals when they are hungry that you can get them where you want them to go? That's the way you've done to me. It means the nature is a kind of living branch or a piece of fruit that you make a signal. You used to signal to the animals. So in the end of this scene, we can think that Socrates recognized that nature could be interesting. But is interesting because not to the, how can I say, to the spiritual life, but in the sense that nature gives you some refresh, some it's a kind of relax. So it's interesting to find a very nice tree because you can then have a chance to be free, to believe, to be relaxed, and then to start to think about, in this case, about beauty, about philosophy. It means to be a philosopher is in some way to forget nature and just to recognize that nature can help you in a psychological or, I don't know, approach, relax, to make you free, to make you live, to make philosophy then. So this is interesting because along of our Western story of philosophy, we can say that nature was in general not a problem, especially when we think in ethical perspective. So this is our aim. We are thinking about nature again. We can say that we had animal turn in philosophy, if I can express in these terms. We have 60 or 80 years ago, we have a new interest about animals, and more recently we have a very strong interest about plants. It means that I don't know, 10 or 15 years ago, we can say a vegetable turn in philosophy as well. because we are thinking about this problem of nihilism I told you. It means part of the philosophy of the 20th century is connect with this problem of philosophy, the consequence of nihilism in our society. And one of this problem is the disconnection, the how can I say, the break of the relationship between animals and non-human animals, about human beings, non-human animals and plants. It means we are probably because of the environmental crisis, the global warming, we are speaking more about how to relate it, to be related with this other kind of life. So it started a very big preoccupation about plants in the 10 or 16 years ago. And we can say that this is a movement started more late with the animal turn. But there is three philosophical perspectives, two new philosophical perspectives in the 20th century philosophy. And this is because we are thinking about this kind of empty, this kind of situation of we are lost, we are forgot to think about being, to use here the Heideggerian vocabulary. And now they are discussing this question of Heidegger's philosophy that say that animals and plants has no word or have no it means that we have no condition to describe the life of animals and plants in terms of existencia. It means it's not possible to describe this kind of life in terms of the Dasein existential life. It means that now there is a very big force to describe animals and plants' life using the same vocabulary, the same lexical that, for instance, the existentialism used to describe only in that case, only the human beings. So this is problematic because when you think about the philosophical perspective about, for instance, the human beings, we are denouncing today very strong the anthropocentrism of this system. It means philosophy is a very anthropocentric system to describe life, and for this, in consequence of this, philosophy is always a kind of forgot of the being of animals and plants. In general, philosophy, as I told you already, is part of this system that have no interest about animals and more about plants. So there is a problem here because we are speaking about an anthropocentristic perspective. When the philosophy started to speak about non-human animals, we can say that now we have clear that it appears another problem, the problem of zoocentrism, because when we start to speak about animals, always animals are, how can I say, are the perspective, are the paradigm of life. So we are speaking about life, and always we are forgetting the plants as well. So they are speaking now about this perspective as a zoocentric perspective, because the focus is always just the animals. So to open another door, to open another horizon in this debate, a lot of philosophers today, we can say, for instance, the names of, we can remember, for instance, Michael Marder and the very, very important book about called Plant Thinking. He's a a Portuguese philosopher, but he's a North American philosopher, but he's how can I say, Portuguese citizen. He will. I have to say that he will be here in our Congress in November. He confirmed his presence in our event. It will be very nice. Don't lose this speech. My commander, or for instance, Emanuele Coccia. I will speak about him more after. And others, like for instance, the Italian philosopher Mancuso. No, there is a lot of philosophers, especially in Europe or in France, for instance, interested in this discussion about plants. And they are speaking about biocentrism. As a tentative, they are trying to respond or to confront this anthropocentric perspective or this zoocentric perspective. So they are speaking about biocentrism. And in the case of Marder, inspired by Aristotle, and especially by a disciple of Aristotle called Theophrastus, so they are speaking about phytocentrism. Phyto is a word used by Aristotle and even by Theophrastus to speak about everything that grows. So everything that grows, we can say, is a phyto. That's why physics has the same etymological. If you think about the etymological origin of the word, phyto is the same of physics. So physics is everything that grows. So when we're speaking about phytocentrism, because phyto is using to describe plants, but Martin, remember us that when you say phyto, we have to remember that phyto is not plants only, but phyto is everything that grows. It means everything that has life, because everything that's a living being is something that grows. So to say phytocentrism is just to have point of view, a different point of view, started to think not from the animals or from the human beings, but to start to think about from the plants, from the point of view of the plants, or if I can use a Portuguese word here, we say in Portuguese ponto de vista, but they are speaking about a ponto de vida, not only about a point of view, but a point of life. A point of life, it means a kind of life. We have this is a very important idea of this movement. We have to describe the word, it means, to describe the world, to make philosophy is always to make philosophy, is always to think from a point of life. From ponto de vista, de ponto de vista, and not only a ponto de vista. You have to remember that is always to think about a point of life, ponto de vida. I don't know if you follow me, but the question is to make philosophy is always to start in some place. It means in some point of view, and we have to say that to starting in a point of view is always to start not in a point of view just of the human beings. This is anthropocentric system, or not in a point of view of my dog, for instance, Plinio, who is here, but it means of the animals, of the non-human animals, but to think from a point of life of the plants, for instance. And that's why we have to say that there is a very interesting topic a very interesting issues starting when you think now, this is new, to think now, to make philosophy, for instance, to starting of this new point of life, new point of view, that is the point of view of the plants. And why we have to make this? Because plants have to has a lot of things to teach us about what is to live in this world, what is to habit this world. This is the question, because when you are just speaking about the point of view of human beings or the non-human animals, you have a kind of response about this question: what is, or what is life, what is to be here in this world, what is the relationship with this world. And always we forgot in this situation that world is not a thing that is different for us, that is an object in front of us. When you think about from the point of view of plants, we have to understand that world and plants, it means world and all these beings are part of an unique system. It means that plants create the world and world creates the plants. And this is interesting because what I did now, this affirmation I did is very interesting because confront a very big tradition. Start, for instance, in the evolutionary theorism or theory that says that always the environmental, the world, the nature is the responsible to create the beings, the organisms. You know, if you remember Darwin, for instance, we have to remember that for Darwin, the environment is very important to understand the impacts on the organisms. But now we are thinking that plants, when you think about this new point of view or new point of life, you have to recognize that plants are not, they say a very, very nice, very beautiful expression they have, I think is Kocha. He wrote that the plants are not part or just part of this, how can I say, the landscape. Plants are the gardeners of the world. Plants are the gardeners of the world. It's not just an object in a big garden, but they are the garden as well. They create, they have the relationship between plants and world are double, are not an opposite, like there is an object, there is a world, and there is a man describing this. No, we have to understand what is plant, how plant habits this world, how plant live in this world, how plant relation with is related with this world, and how plants create this world. World is not a thing that there is here. Nature or environmental things are there, and plants are part of this. No, plants create. They have the power to create this world. This is very interesting for me, and this is phytocentrism. This is so to describe everything from the point of view of plants, the point of life of plants, to understand, and this is the ethical perspective of this movement, to understand how plants habit, how plants live in this world, create this world. And for us, human beings, is interesting because we perhaps have the chance here, the opportunity to understand better what is the problem of habitation, the world. How is which is a big problem for us in the nihilistic perspective, because the nihilistic perspective show us that we are not here. For instance, if you think about Camus' philosophy, or for instance, this O Estrangeiro, no? this point of view that we are not from here, we are from the other world. Or, for instance, if you read Jonas' work about Gnosticism, you have to remember that for Jonas, the Gnosis is part one of the perspectives of Gnosis is always the feeling that man is not of this world. That's why we have no compromise with this world. So we are not responsible for nothing here. Can you understand why this question is important in the ethical perspectives? Because if you think that the world is not for, you have no compromise with this world, you have you are not obligated to be responsible with this world, or you are not obligated to make connection or to take care of the world. So this is the new perspectives. But when we put these new perspectives, we have to think about the question of essence of the being, how to describe the essence of the being. So we use these three words or the two first words to define this essence of the beings. If you are speaking about human beings, you speak about humanity, or to express the essence of the human beings, humanity. There is something in the human beings that is part only of this kind of beings. So we say humanity. If you speak about animals, non-human animals, so you are speaking about animality. So we are speaking about something that only the essence of the animals. So only animals have these things, animality. And they are speaking now about vegetality. So we are speaking about something that only the vegetables have. So the essence of the vegetables, the plants, the essence of the plants are this vegetality, and this is part of our tentative to describe the essence of these beings. But the first question is how to describe this in, we need always the metaphysical, how can I say, issues, the metaphysical perspective to describe this essence. So in same works of these new philosophers, they are speaking about against metaphysical perspectives. They are speaking that it's not possible to think in the essence of this plant, for instance, in the same way we spoke about animality or humanity in the history of philosophy. So there is a new thing here. Why? Because when you think about plants has no how can I say, a fixed essence. There is no something. Look, a plant is always a kind of thing that is always growing. There is no objective in this growing. And different of animals, we can say that, for instance, animals, they born, they grow, and they death, because they finish his sexual life. And when you are speaking about plants, no, because plants is always growing. And why plants are always growing? Because the being of plants is confused, is the same thing that growing and to grow and to be in the case of plants are the same thing. Do you understand this? In the case of plants, to grow and to be is the same thing. If you remember, Jonas wrote that in the case of life, you have to understand that life is always something that do something, or expressing in another words, to be a human life. To be alive is always to be something that change the form with the world, to making a connection with the world, and so changing always his perspective, his forms. So the relationship between form and the substance in Jonas' perspective. But if you think about plants, this is more clear. This is more clear. Is more easy to understand, because in the case of plants, we can say plants are the paradigm of the organisms, the paradigm of the life beings. Because in the case of plants, there is no option. Plants, to be a plant, is always to be something that is growing. And so if it's growing, is changing always his form, is changing always his body, for instance. So there is no condition, there is no option to describe this kind of life in a metaphysical perspective, do you know? Because metaphysical perspectives always is trying to find this essence of the being with a vocabulary or a lexical that is trying to, I don't know, to make a prison. Perhaps we have to remember here Gianni Vattimo. Gianni Vattimo spoke about the violence of the concept. The concept is a kind of violence. Of course, Vattimo learned this with Nietzsche, because Nietzsche always spoke about, for instance, the idea of concept as a Begriffsdom. Begriffsdom is a domo, is a kind of house where you try to be inside just to protect yourself from the nature, the dangers of the nature. So when you find a word or a concept, you are always trying to be very comfortable in this place to understand the world. So metaphysical perspectives with this language system is always a kind of is always a tentative to find a place, a comfortable place, and this is for Nietzsche is a very, very big problem. So and I mentioned Vattimo, so I have to remember you as well, that for instance, for Michael Marder, in the first part of his book called Plant Thinking, he spoke about three new perspectives about plants, saying us that if you think about philosophy in the philosophy of plants, vegetable philosophy, we have to find three new, how can I say, not fundamental, but a new basis of this anti-metaphysical philosophy or post-metaphysical philosophy. So to think about plants, to speak about plants, is always to speak in a non-metaphysical perspectives, in a post-metaphysical perspectives, or even in an anti-metaphysical perspectives. And he gave us three new bases. The first one is the hermeneutical, the phenomenological hermeneutical perspectives. It means to understand that when you are speaking about plants, you have to leave these very strong perspectives of conceptualization or metaphysical concept or something like this. So the phenomenological description of the life in terms of hermeneutic perspectives. It means in interpretation perspectives. The second base is for Marder, pensiero debole, Roberto, is something like in Portuguese is pensamento fraco, no?
Weak thinking, I think. Weak thinking.
Thank you. Weak thinking. And, so this is another base, because it is a refuse this kind of philosophy refused the same idea that there is a violence of a concept, so they refused the metaphysical conceptualization of the life. And the last one is this constructive philosophy of Derrida and the others, because when you are speaking about plants, you have to remember that plants are always part of a big system. So it's not possible to have this, how can I say, this complete view of the vegetables, but always you have to remember that when you are speaking about plants, you have a fragmentary perspective. This is the first idea. So to make philosophy, or to make philosophy about animality and especially about vegetality, is always to make philosophy in a non-metaphysical perspectives. Not always, but perhaps it's not correct to say always, because there is some metaphysical perspectives, for instance, in the Koch approach. But in that sense, that especially with Marder, that plants are not how can I say, we cannot understand plants in the same systems that we are speaking about humanity and animality. And another idea in this new philosophy, or in this new perspective, is that we have to recognize that when we are speaking about humanity, animality, and vegetality, we are speaking always about some cumulative existence. And this is the first question is that we have to recognize plants have existence. It means perhaps plants have the same world as an animal or as a human being. But we have to recognize that plants have some world. So if plants have some relationship with the world, so we have to recognize that the kind of life of plants is a kind of life, or is a kind of existence. So we have to use some words of the traditional history of philosophy to describe the life of plants. That's why, for instance, we can find words like communication, intelligence, or for instance, solidarity or empathy or something, this kind of words that are, we take from another horizon of philosophy, but especially this horizon of humanity things, topics, or animality topics. And now we use these words to describe plants, because we are insisting that plants have some relation, special or different relation with the world, and then plants have existence. And why you use these old words? Because we have no new words to describe this. We are just starting to make vegetable philosophy. Perhaps we have to invent new vocabulary, new words, new concepts to describe this kind of life. We don't have. So we try to use these words to recognize that plants have existence. And another thing, if you start with the plants and you go to the first stage of the humanity, we have to understand that this is a cumulative history of life. And Jonas gave us these ideas in his work, The Phenomenon of Life, because Jonas insists all time that man is not separated of this other kind of other kind of life. So man is part of the rest of the life. But look, the problem when you say this, that man is part of the life, is easy, or is easier to understand when you speak about animals. So when you say that man is part of animals, or there is some animality in the humanity, the humanity have some part of their of this of the essence is the animality. It means that men have some man is an animal in few words. So man is an animal. This is very, very easy, especially when you think in the mammals, in the, I don't know, the big animals like monkeys, or of course it's difficult when you say this and you imagine, for instance, a perroquet in French, or for instance, we speak about insects, for instance. It's difficult to understand that there is something in you that is part of the insects, and that there is between you and the insect some cumulative existence. It means that you have something that the insects only have. So this is difficult, but is very, very difficult when you think that you are as a plant. It means that as a man or a woman, you have something that even the plants have, that you are part, that the plants are part of your body, that the plants gave you something during the history of life, something that you are that you have now. And why? How can you understand this affirmation that plants gave you during the history of life something? What is this? Which is this? What plants gave you? And this is very interesting because Jonas gave us the answer again, because Jonas told us that plants have some kind of spirituality, and this you know because you had a lot of I imagine that you have a lot of speeches about Jonas here. They quote, they explain better than me this kind of things. But I have to remember you that again, that Jonas gave us the answer, because for Jonas, all the kind of life, including the plants, so all the kind of life, including the plants, have some stages, some stage of spirituality, some mind, in other words. So we have to understand the existence of the plants as part of the history of spirit in the life. When animals appears in the world, and after the plants when they appear in the world, they leave the inorganic existence. They started to be spiritual beings. So plants have spirit because they started to, and this is the answer of Jonas, to make changes of themselves with the environment. So Jonas called this, as we know, metabolism, the metabolic condition of all the life beings, all the beings, all the organisms is part of this cumulative existence. It means that when I see a plant, when I speak about plants, when I'm trying to understand plants, I have to recognize that plants to be because plants are living being. So we have to recognize that plants have some degrees, some parts, some experience of interiority, not subjectivity as the humanity, but interiority. Again, this is very perhaps easier to understand when you are speaking about animals, but when you are speaking about plants, this is not so easy, and this is a very, very new how can I say, new perspective, because you have to understand what is a plant, what is to be a plant, or who is a plant, speaking about this very important part of of their being, that part of this essence of the being of to be a plant is to be being that have some interiority. And you have to understand this interiority, this spirituality, as this capacity, this faculty to change something with the environment. To change something is to be free. This is the question. To be free, there is some degree, something that we can say that is freedom, even in the plant system. So this is the basis for me of this new philosophy of plants and the new connections that we have to find between humanity, animality, and vegetality, between human beings, non-human beings, animals, and plants. We have to recognize that we have this cumulative existence, and we are now here because of these other degrees, other parts of this history of the spirit in the history of the life. And that's why, for me, Jonas, that is not quoted by Marder, by Kocha, or by Mancuso. I don't know. I don't know, of course, everything about them. But for me, in these books I read, I never found the reference about Jonas' philosophy. But we can recognize that Jonas gave us the opportunity to understand this question, to understand the relationship between humanity, animality, and vegetality in terms of in new terms, even if we have to understand as well to recognize that Jonas don't spoke so much about plants. Jonas don't wrote so much about plants, about vegetables, but he recognized some dignity. I'm speaking in the, how can I say, political or not only in scientific or ontological words, but you know that this is possible when you are speaking about Jonas. Plants have some dignity, plants have some value, and so when you read the ontology of Jonas, you can find some opportunities, some ideas, some justification to understand why plants have so many values or this dignity, because plants have some spiritual life. Plants are part of this cumulative existence, and so is very is legitimated to find or to describe plants in these terms. So just to remember some ideas I don't have the opportunity here and not so many times to remember you about these arguments, but just now to find something, and then I will try now to give you some ideas, to remember you some ideas of this new ontology, or as Roberto wrote in his book, this revolutionary ontology of Jonas, and then just to remember you some points of this new point of view of non-human animals, and then to speak about to finish my speech now about the vegetable point of view, or the point of view of plants. In this new perspective of Jonas, or this new ontology, we have to remember to start that Jonas is against, first of all, against the dualistic, is not here, but I have to remember the dualistic, how can I say, the dualistic perspective to understand life. And to dualistic perspective, part of this argument is against the idea that there is, when you speak about life, you are speaking about some object that is something different from the subject. Remember, if you remember this argument I told you about the cumulative existence, you have to remember that this is not a dualistic perspective. This is we are trying to break this separation, to reconnect human, animals, and plants. So this is not a dualistic philosophy. It is not a dualistic ontology. And which is the problem in this affirmation is that so we have to reform, to say in a few words, in a word, to reform the scientific perspective to life, because science always is hostage to the materialistic point of view. It means science always went to the animals, and especially to the plants, trying to describe an object, trying to describe something that is inert, something that is dead in the end, because Jonas spoke about the ontology of death. The ontology of that part of the argument, that always only the death, only the something that is died can be known. It means there is no philosophy about life. Is always, and there is no science about life. The science, when they have to describe the scientists, when they have to describe life, always they are using the tools, how can I say, the tools that they are used to describe stones or stars, or I don't know, the inorganic life. So there is a gap between the science and the life. This is the project of this new ontology of Jonas. Jonas tried so refuse the materialistic monism that life is just a matter. Life could be described just using the tools of these living died objects. And in the other side, life is just matter. So we can describe matter as a stone, as this, I don't know, the other parts of the world. So this is the materialistic monism for Jonas. And of course, he refused this perspective. And another perspective is to understand life just as a spirit, as a spirituality. Like, for instance, the perspective of the idealistic monism of philosophy, idealistic, or even of the religion, that says that to think about the life or to understand what is life is always to understand something spiritual. It means something that you can describe using the tools of the description of spirit. So Jonas' ontology is always trying to find another perspective that could help us to describe life, recognizing that life is something double. There is in life something, how can I say, that is matter, and something that is spirit. But when you have to describe this double perspective, you don't need to describe this double perspective in dualistic or materialistic or idealistic perspectives. We have to find a monistic perspective to describe these double things that characterize life. So you have to remember, you have to find a kind of integral monism. This is the word used by Jonas. A monistic perspective that have the intention to integrate mother and spirit in the same perspective. That's why Jonas wrote this book. You know, this book is the English version. You have to remember that we have in Portuguese o princípio vida, ensaio de uma para uma biologia filosófica. This is the title in Portuguese. And we have to remember that this Portuguese translation in Brazil is was made from the German translation. The German translation after the success of the imperative of responsibility in German. So after the success of Das Prinzip Verantwortung, so they decided to publish this book, this Phenomenon of Life, to make a connection with the Das Prinzip Verantwortung. So Das Prinzip Leben. Das Prinzip Leben, o princípio da vida, the life, the principle of life. But we have to remember that the original name of this book is, the original title of this book is The Phenomenon of Life, toward a biological philosophy. It means we refuse a biological, in terms of scientific, this kind of scientific perspective that was just seeing that life is always or dualistic or materialistic perspectives. But now Jonas tried to describe life in a monistic perspective. That's why he called this project of a biological philosophy, uma filosofia biológica. Biological philosophy, uma biologia filosófica. Philosophical biology, sorry, I'm confusing the terms. Is philosophical biology, uma biologia filosófica, philosophical biology. So this is the project of this book. But we can say as well that this book tried to understand or to make look here, one kind of philosophy of life, trying to understand what is the life in the point of view of relationship with death, and describing the body in a theory of being. Then Jonas, like this in the second essay, he speak about aspects of Darwinism. Look, he tried to make to find some justification of these ideas in the scientific perspective. It means that Jonas don't abandon this scientific perspective, but he tried to take some aspects of this, of course, of this theory. Then a meaning of metabolism, which is the main concept of this book, and then how the forms of life could be understood using these ideas of freedom and metabolism. So we have to understand the special kind of animal life. So to move and to feel is two perspectives to understand what is the specific of the animals. And then this very, very interesting and beautiful essay about the nobility of sight, a study of phenomenology of the sense, very nice. And then the image, and then look, the book make the transition. There is a chapter here, transition from the philosophy of organism to the philosophy of man. It means how to describe man using this kind of tools, this kind of theoretic tools give us by this reflection on about philosophy of life. So the man is again part of the nature, part of this process, part of the metabolism, the movement, the feelings, the sensation, the perception. It means that the freedom, when we speak about freedom, in the case of men, we have to recognize that freedom, we can find freedom even in the plants and then in the animals. This is the project of this book, you just to remember. And I have to remember you that in these essays about animals, that we can find something about plants. because Jonas is, for me, zoocentric in this perspective. This is because this is very strong to say, but it's curious because Jonas speak about plants, but always comparing plants with the animals, saying that plants is different of the animals. So in this kind of things, someone could say that Jonas is always victim of the zoocentric perspective. But we can say that he has some difference of this additional zoocentrism, because Jonas recognized in the plant some superiority. The word is very strong as well, but we can use superiority to describe this kind of life that is in the perspective, in the organic perspective, not in the ontological perspective. In the ontological perspective, plants are primitive, and man is the end of the evolution. So men have always a very special place. So plants and men are not in the same level, but this is in the ontological perspective. In the ontological perspective, plants, animal, and human are not in the same level. Men are in the higher level than plants, of course, in the ontological perspective. But if you think about the organic or organic perspective, we can say that Jonas recognizing plants some superiority in relations, in comparing with the other living being, because plants have they how can I say, they has discovered something to make the relationship with the world that other forms of life have not discovered. So plants have, for instance, photosynthesis, the capacity to find nutrition, to take nutrition, look from the air, from the sun, from the light. This is very nice, this is beautiful, this is great, and this is very superior if you compare with the animals. The animals have to move, have to be careful all time, have to make to take the opportunity to make to find the other animals, or look the question. Animals always need to eat other animals or plants. It means animals always have to eat other form of life. Plants no. Plants can live eating not animals, not other plants, but inorganic material. So look, how can we describe this kind of living being, not without recognize that in this case there is some superiority, some organic superiority in the case of plants. Organic and not ontological. Why I try to make this difference? Because for me, in the case of ontological perspective, we have to recognize that this great capacity of plants, that I can call superiority, organic superiority of plants, make plants very lazy, very comfortable in the world. So plants was not necessary to plant to for instance, to improve the capacity of movement. Plants have movement, but are comparing with the animal, the movements of plants are very, very slowly, very, it's not so quick, so how can I say, so improved like we find in the animals. So plants, because of this superiority, of this organic superiority, plants are lazy, and then plants are not so superiority in the ontological perspective. So plants have no so how can I say, so the freedom, for instance, the freedom in the case of plants are not so high, or so how can I say, sorry, desenvolvido in Portuguese. I forgot the word in English. Sorry.
Developed.
Sorry, it's so easy.
Easier. It's almost the same.
Yes. So developed. Do you know? In the case of plants, the spirit is not so developed like in the animals. Why? Because he don't need this. He don't need this. The environmental gave to the plants. They gave them the opportunity to live without so many preoccupation. This is the superiority. This is the beautiful thing. Because the plants are always sleeping. Jonas says that the plants are a little lazy and sleeping always because it's not dangerous. But in the same situation, plants are always open to the world, to take the light, to take the nutrition for the using the roots, or to for instance, to make connection with the other plants, or with the fungus, these kind of things. So we are always thinking that plants have organic superiority, but this organic superiority was a kind of justification to plants have no developed these spiritual perspectives. So this is the perspective of Jonas. Jonas says that plants are have this superiority perspective, but in the other side, plants are the ontological fragility of life, because because they are open to the world, always they are vulnerable to the world, because the animals can take the parts of the plants or something like this. The plants are always, for instance, dependent of the rain or the nutrients of the soil. So in the same case, plants is more vulnerable than animals, but in the same case, plants are superior because plants have this condition that that animals have no. So in the preface of this book, we can read that Jonas wrote, but at its briefest, this book offers an existential interpretation of biological facts. For me, this is very interesting. Roberto knows that this preface is different of the German version that we use to translate our version in Portuguese. This in our version we don't find this word existential. Why Jonas wrote this is a very big question. I don't know why, but I have to put this question. Why Jonas used existential interpretation of biological facts in the English version and not in the German version? For me, because to speak about existential interpretation is to speak about that thing I told you before, because there is a very Heideggerian reference here, because Jonas are trying to say that when you think about biological facts, it means about organisms, about life, you have to recognize a kind of existence there. So to make an interpretation, as this phenomenological perspective tries, to make an interpretation is always to recognize that when you are speaking about life, you have to use these tools offered by the existential interpretation of the life, of the life. It means use the same tools that we we traditionally used to describe man. So now we use these tools to describe the life as a whole. It means the life of animals, non-human animals, and even the life of plants. So Jonas offers us in this first line the idea that plants have existence, that plants have world, that he don't agree with his master Heidegger that wrote that plants have no worlds, have no world. For Jonas, plants, even animals and human, of course, but plants have world. That's why he used the word existential here, because it is possible to make an existential interpretation of all the biological facts. It means including the vegetable facts. It means including the plants. Another thing we can read here is this next I sign here. On its part, scientific biology, by its roles confined to the physical outwards facts, must ignore the dimension of inwardness that belongs to life. It means that scientific biology is not enough, is not sufficient to describe life. We need more. We need what? We need a philosophical biology, not a scientific biology. Scientific biology is in a prison constructed by this interpretation, this materialistic perspective. So by scientific biology is not have not condition to describe life. Of course, Jonas wrote this in 1966. I have no condition here, and I have no competence to describe the history of biology. But I have to say that, of course, after that, a lot of biologists, they are speaking about this problem that Jonas wrote here. And they are trying to make scientific biology, how can I say, to superate this problem, to confront this problem, to solve this problem, to fix this problem, using, for instance, other tools. For instance, I have to remember here Francisco Varela and Humberto Maturana, who wrote a very interesting work about new perspectives to biology. And I have to remember that the last book of Francisco Varela, called La Fenomenología de la Vida, is a kind of, the title of this book of Francisco Varela is a kind of homage, how can I say, a tribute to Hans Jonas, tribute to Hans Jonas. He wrote, he quoted Jonas, and he wrote, this book is a kind of tribute to a philosopher that have to confront with these problems. I confront as well, and he's speaking about Jonas. He how can I say? He offers us an interpretation of all the phenomenon of the biological phenomenon. This word "all" is in italic, so it's interesting because Varela recognized the very important the importance of the philosopher Jonas, saying that when Jonas tried to make an existential interpretation of biological facts, he made a very strong and very important and very complete work. The work of Jonas gave us the base, the base to think about life and all the life. So it's interesting to recognize that Jonas offered to the new biology some some perspectives to think about this kind of psychological unity of life. This is the aim of Jonas in this book, to reclaim for the psychological unity of life, to understand life in a unity of how can I say, matter and spirit. The same thing in only one theory? This is the question. So the question is to break through the anthropocentric confines of idealist and existentialist philosophy. That's why, remember, Jonas put this existential interpretation here to say that he put in between comma, because he recognized that the existentialism by his master Heidegger and the others is a philosophy confined with this same project, the same characteristic of the idealistic perspective. So for Jonas, idealistic and existentialistic perspective of philosophy are the same. The same in one side, and in the other side, the materialistic perspective of the natural science. So when you think about idealistic perspective, we have to remember that existentialism for Jonas is part of this. And when you remember about the science, natural science, you have to remember that there is a materialistic perspective in that sense. And for Jonas, these are two parts of one same history, the history of our anthropocentric perspective to understand life. Okay, so the project of Jonas is to make a philosophy. This is how Jonas started the book translated in Portuguese. So this is another kind of text that Jonas used to start the German version of the book. A philosophy of life has its object, the philosophy of organism and the philosophy of spirit. This is already a first statement of the philosophy of life. In fact, it's preliminary hypothesis, which will have to be verified as it is realized. For pointing out its external limits imply nothing less than the affirmation that even in its most primitive structures, the organic already prefigures the spiritual. Jonas is very, very clear in that affirmation. Even in its most primitive structures, it means, for instance, in the structures of a leaf, of a plant. If you think about the microorganisms in that case, even in that place, we can already find the spiritual condition of life. Prefigurate. I love this word. Prefigurate. It means is there. You have to make an effort to discover, but is there? The science have some is blind to see this, but the philosophy have to prepare us to see the spiritual perspectives of these primitive structures, and we have to develop this new philosophy, this new ontology to discover, to make clear, to open the door to this new perspective, recognizing so that in the structures, the primitive structures of the organic life, we find the spiritual perspectives. And that even, so in consequence of this, even in its highest dimensions, the spirit remains part of the organic. It means there is no spirit where there is no organic life. There is no angels in the biological perspective. There is no angels. Angels are issues just for religion. If you are speaking about the ontology, the rational perspective, it means that we have to recognize that in the highest dimensions of the spirit, the highest dimension of the spirits need always to be part of the organic life. So in the preceding consideration, the concept of freedom, this says Jonas, has already twice appeared. related to perception and related to action. Jonas say in this text of the preface of the Principio Vida, it means das Prinzip Leben, that freedom is part of the perception and action. It is to be hoped that this concept will be found on the terrain of the spirit and will, but not before. It means we always thinking that freedom is a word that is very welcome when you are speaking about spirituality things, or when you are speaking about will, not when you are speaking about something before that. It means living beings that have no spirit, that have no will, like for instance animals and plants, because these are characteristics only for man. So there is no possible to applicate the word freedom in that cases. So we hope, we always have the expectation, hope is not the correct word probably here, but the expectation that is not that we can use freedom just in that case. But Jonas say, and if it is found anywhere, it must be in the dimension of acting and not in the dimension of receiving. It means when you think about agent, not in the passive, in the vivant, for instance, the passive beings. But if from the beginning the spirit is prefigurate in the organic, so must be freedom. It means if you think that there is a spirit in the organic life, in the primitive structure of life, so we are obligated to recognize that there is freedom even in that place, even where there is no will, or even where we are not is not how can I say, we are not we are not we have no idea that is possible. Even there we can find freedom. And what we affirm is that already metabolism, the basic layer of all organic existence, allows freedom to be recognized, or that it is effectively the first form of freedom. So where I found metabolism, there is even freedom. We have to recognize so that in the primitive structure of life, it means in the plants or in the microorganisms, we have their freedom as well. So freedom is part of this history of life. I think I have Roberto. We have come to a break, or we finish here. I have more 15 minutes probably to finish.
As you wish. It's up to you. I mean, you can choose either to go straight ahead and finalize your presentation then, or we can take a 5 minutes break now, as you wish.
Okay, so let's go on, and then we can open to question or make a break. We decide after. Just I have a lot of things here, but my time is finishing. So I want to just to point you something that I told you, Jonas, in these essays, the fourth essays, to move and to feel. He spoke about plants, about the characteristic distinguish animals and plant life. So for Jonas, animals have 3 new characteristics: mobility, perception, and emotion. For Jonas, the animals are always passionate for living being. So because why? Because animal different of plants have motility, perception, and emotion. I don't know if Gregory is here, because Gregory is studying the different uses of in Jonas, Roberto, about the word mobility, and movement. Perhaps there is some thing here. I don't know. Gregory will tell us after after his work if there is interesting here. But just to point you that mobility is different, perhaps, of motility and even of movement. So Jonas is speaking about animals, and animals have mobility, perception, and emotion. So if you think about the three kinds of life, plants, non-human animal, and human animals, we have to decide to understand that there is some different kind of freedom. Freedom is not the same. Spirit is not the same in these three kinds of life. Of course, because when you speak about plants, we are speaking about two kinds of freedom, or if you want, two kinds of spiritual life. First one is metabolism. Plants are beings, living beings, because plants have the capacity to the metabolic capacity. They can change themselves with the words, themselves with the words, with words. Sorry. The other thing that we can recognize in plants is that plants have the, for instance, the capacity to sense some sensation. To be what is sensation? To be affected by the world. For instance, this kind of plant you touch and they sleep. We say sleeping dormideiras in Portuguese. I don't remember now the scientific name, but it's not important because the scientific name is already a violence. But this kind of, I prefer dormideira because the sleeping plants, you touch this, and so this is a kind of sensation, a kind of sense, because plants, they cannot be, how can I say, they are touched by the world and they feel something. So this is characteristic that plants have. We can say that in some sense, plants have some motility, but Jonas recognized just motility or just movement as not inside of the plant, not from inside, but from outside. So there is some mobility, some motility, but this condition is not a proper characteristic of plants, because if you think about mobility, about motility, about movement, of course, you have to recognize that this is a kind of freedom, a kind of stage of freedom, a degree that is a proper characteristic of animals, not of plants. Even if you have to recognize that plants have some kind of motility, just to confirm that for Jonas there is contiguity between these three kinds of life. There is no, rupture, very strong ruptures between them. So we have to recognize that animals have something that plants as well have. So plants have two, just to, how can I say, to describe in a very didactic perspective, plants have metabolism and the sensation. Animals have mobility, perception. Perception is different than sensation. Why? Because perception is from inside to outside. Sensation is from outside to inside, but perception not. Perception, for instance, the vision, the sight. The vision is necessary for the animals, is the most important capacity of perception that Jonas recognized to the animals. So when you speak about perception, there is some more rich, we have to recognize more rich capacity of spirituality in the animals, comparing with the plants. So plants have no perception because plants have no need. They don't need the necessity. They don't have the necessity to develop this kind of thing. And emotion, for instance, animals for Jonas have two kinds of emotion that are in the base of the animal life: fear and desire. Desire, for instance, to nutrition, or desire to reproduction, to sexuality desire, sexual desire, or emotion, or fear, for instance, a fear of the other. Sorry, there is some words here now. Some fear, for instance, of the other animals, or I don't know, some dangers in the nature life. So in the environment. So animals have emotion, plants have no emotion. And in the end of these degrees, we can find the men. And the men have, I have to say, animals have metabolism, sensation, mobility, perception, and emotion. And when I speak about men, I have to put another capacity, the rationality, for instance. The rationality is another degree of freedom. So in the man, we found, as is a cumulative existence, we have to recognize that men have metabolism, men have sensation, have motility, perception, emotion, and a new thing, rationality. So this is the characteristic of freedom described by Jonas, and in this perspective to describe the human life. Just to finish, sorry, I have more text than time. Non-human animals, just word, because I believe that I spoke a lot about this. Jonas studied the implications of the theories of natural selection. For instance, the refusal of theology. The evolution is not a teleology history of the life. The elimination of immutable essence, the idea that species are not fixed. I spoke about this. Formative role of environment. This is interesting because after this new movement, they are discussing about this. I told you. Mutation as pathology, disturbance of stability, and not the path towards the development of a perfection. And the fifth, continuity, because natural does not precede by leaps. In other words, Jonas wrote about animals in the anthropomorphism, recognizing the anthropomorphism as a hermeneutic approach of the living beings, recognizing that only life can know life. It means there is some biomorphism, as Tiago Vasconcelos told us last week in his classes about animals. He wrote a very great thesis about this, the expression of expressivity of animals in Jonas' philosophy. So Tiago spoke about biomorphism, not anthropomorphism, because if you speak about anthropomorphism, it means that man put the characteristic of his life in the other lives. But when Jonas says that only life can know life, is because man, before to be a man, is to be a living life, a living being. So before to be a man is something that lives, and as something that lives, he can describe life. So it's not an anthropomorphism, but biomorphism. Do you know? I like this idea of Tiago's idea, because make clear for me that Jonas have this biological belonging of recognize this biological belonging of the human being to the realm of living beings, and is because that fact that Jonas can describe life, that man can describe life. Life is man is part of the life, and so we have to recognize animal freedom at the same time as the precariousness of this kind of existence, because freedom is a special kind of freedom because freedom is needed as the concept of Jonas, or is there is a dialectical freedom, because for Jonas the animal have to live this, this lazy life, this sleeping life, because there is desire, there is fear, there is threats in the environment. So it's necessary to open to the world, but this overture is always dangerous. So the animal have this condition to be free, but in the same time, this freedom is very important, is very different of this other kind of freedom that you find, for instance, in the man society, in the man realm. Let's just to finish speaking a little about the vegetal turn or plants. We have here a quotation of Emanuele Coccia, who says something very interesting. We talk little about them, about plants, and hardly know their names. Philosophy has always neglected them, and with contact rather than distraction, because it means that philosophy don't speak about plants, not because of a kind of distraction, but because it was necessary for philosophy, because this philosophy was humanistic philosophy, anthropocentric philosophy, zoocentric philosophy. So they need, the philosophers of this perspective, they need to forget plants. We spoke about this. Philosophy now must look again at nature. For Coccia, for instance, he wrote, for several centuries, with rare exceptions, philosophy no longer contemplates nature. The right to deal with and speak about the world of non-human things and living beings belongs mainly and exclusively to other disciplines. So we know that these disciplines are always scientific. Plants, animals, common or extraordinary atmospheric phenomena, the elements and their combinations, the constellations, the planets and the stars were definitively expelled from the imaginary catalog of its privileged object of study. It means philosophy forgot these kind of things. So philosophy is victim of reductionism, by reducing nature solely to that which precedes spirit, which is thus qualified as human, we know. So philosophy forgot animals and plants, and now we have to come back to this point of life. As I told you, this impasse is the result of an obstinate repression in philosophy, that of the living being and of the fact that all knowledge is already an expression of the being of life. So one will never be able to know the world as such without going through the mediation of living being. This is why I think Coccia and Jonas have a lot to do, a lot to deal with each other. Another concept we can find in Coccia and Jonas is the concept of immediacy of life. In the case of plant, the form of habitation of the world is the immediacy, because plant and world are the same. Plant is the kind of living being that's have more proximity with the world. So in the same case, plants are the world, make the world, are part of the world and make the world, as I told you in the first part of our speech today. So the world is a vegetable fact. This is very interesting affirmation of Coccia. All objects and utensils that surround us, you can see around you and now, and you can recognize this the truth of this affirmation. All objects and utensils that surround us come from plants. the food, furniture, clothes, fuel, medicines. But above all, the totality of higher animal life, which has an aerobic character, feeds on the organic gaseous exchanges of these beings in the form of oxygen. So our world is a vegetable fact before being an animal fact. Look, this affirmation shows us how important it is to understand what is plant, which is plant, or who is the plant, or more, what is the world what is the world of plants, and more, even more, to understand how plants habits the world, living in the world. And to finish, some ideas of Quentin Hiernaut, is a Belgian philosopher who wrote this very interesting book, or very interesting works, articles and books and other things about these problems. And he put this question: what is to think about vegetables? And we can, with him, recognize something. First of all, something to recognize, something to finish. Sorry, this speech. The first thing, we have to recognize a new value of plants. The exponential development of ecology today. We have to add in this affirmation the exponential development of technology that help us to understand what is to be a plant, or who is to be a plant, or what is which is the world of plants. So there is exponential development of ecology supported by this technology, new technologies, has forced us to understand differently and arguably better the plant kingdom and its interaction with the rest of the world. Plants have thus gone from the status of an objective and passive landscape or environment to that of conditions of absolute possibility for human life and existence on Earth. Plants thus acquire a new value and even dramatic importance. Why dramatic importance? Because of the deforestation of the world. This desertification of the world that we started to speak today is part of our ethical preoccupation, and Jonas' ethical preoccupation that he developed in the imperative of responsibility. So if the plants have a value, the plants are living being, or all the living beings have values, so we have to take care of the plants. So but to take care of the plants means to know what is to be a plant, So ontology and ethics always are together in this task. So we need new approaches. Recent development of plant ethology, for instance, a new approach of how plants, the comportamento of plants, how we can speak about intelligence of plants, for instance. This is part of new perspectives, new approach of ethology. And we can say, for instance, about new approach, we can say that there is new approach of plant neurobiology, neurobiology or neurophysiology. I would say neuropsychology, but neurophysiology. It means neurobiology recognize that plants have some intelligence. And look, this philosophy of plants have to recognize that it's possible to think from the point of view of plants. So it means to recognize that plants are intelligent. If you read the Tree of Knowledge, this book of Maturana and Varela, we have to recognize, to remember that they wrote there that every kind of live only live because they know. To live and to know are the same thing. So if you think about living plants, we have to recognize that there is some kind of knowledge there. The plant is no longer considered simply a passive object of studies. I told you, scientists have established that it is sensitive to a large number of stimuli, able to communicate with its fellows or other species. There is, for instance, examples then that plants or trees they liberate some I don't know, some enzymes to how can I say, to tell to the other trees that, for instance, there is some fire or some, you know, some situation, a stressed situation. There is a lot of new researches about communication in trees, about solidarity, about I don't know, a lot of things about this neurobiology, you know. So able to communicate with its flowers, fellows or other species, to attract or repel them, for instance, to react in different ways depending on the situation, even to memorize events. Do you remember this Dormidata? There is Mancuso makes some experience, the group of Mancuso, that they put this plant under a rain, you know, gota d'água, and then gota d'água. The first time the Dormidata, how can I say, fill this water, and then close the leaves. And after 3 or 4 days, nothing happened more, because they say that the plant memorized this what happens, and then memorize events. So they have some capacity to memorize this and to remobilize information, for instance, to remember this kind of things. So there is very new interesting things. Now I promise I finished just to saying you 4 things. What is, in the end, vegetal philosophy, or philosophy of vegetables, or philosophy of plants? For me, if I have to write a book, perhaps in the future, about vegetal philosophy inspired by Jonas, my book will have 4 chapters. First chapter, studies on the history of botany and physiology, generally based on the negation of plants. And now this chapter of my new book could be about this criticism of zoocentrism and the anthropocentrism, or it means making some historical perspective of why botanic and even physiology and even philosophy of botanic, as we can find, for instance, in Rousseau, or in even in Voltaire and others, Linneo and others, why they, in general, they are referenced, they are part of this history of anthropocentric history, or of our philosophy. So this will be the first part of this philosophy of vegetables. The second part will be studies on plant thinking, as, for instance, Michael Marden did in the last part of his book, plant neurobiology, plant intelligence, plant communication, and this kind of issues that try to discover how can we speak about plant thinking, the thinking of plants, the intelligence of plants. It means to change the place where you are, different of Socrates, where who wants to make philosophy always between men, always in the city. We have to turn this place, to make another, to find another place in the middle of the plants. It means in the point of view of the plant. So this is plant thinking. This will be the second part of this vegetal philosophy. The third part will be studies on plant systematics, or in taxonomy, we have to find new words or new concepts to describe this kind of life. For instance, concepts like individuality, like space, like sexuality, like hybridization, like freedom, suffering, are now, in this point of view, inadequate concepts. So how philosophy could speak from the point of view of plants, in plant thinking, using the same concepts? We need new concepts. We need new, or if we don't have the condition to find new concepts, we have to develop new kinds of considerate these new ways to considerate this concept. To use, for instance, concept of individual. Me and I and Roberto, we are thinking to write something about this. No, Roberto, we have to come back here, come back to his idea, because it's very interesting how to think about individuality, for instance, in this contest. And in the end of my book, we could speak about, for instance, studies on or in environmental ethics, discussing, for instance, moral and legal status or values of plants. I'm speaking here, for instance, about legal status of plants. There is, I have, yes, it's here. I think we are speaking, you are seeing. This book is Christopher Stone, is a lawyer who wrote in the 1972, I think, this book, doivent ils pouvoir plaider. It's very interesting because he is one of the first person to speak about the rights of trees. Trees could have legal status, and why? And you know, so this is part of my last chapter. It means a part of this vegetable philosophy, because we have to ask if it's possible to defend, for instance, trees as, for instance, human beings. Or we know that there is some cultures, that some countries that recognize, I don't know, I don't remember where, but they recognize rights for a river, for instance. I think it's in Canada. And this is very interesting. But not only this, for instance, if you recognize some moral status to plants, we have to think what is, for instance, the huge use of pesticides in our culture. What is, for instance, transgenic perspective that started to changing plants as an object that is an object there in the world, that you can go there and you can change as you know. So transgenic perspective, or for instance, monoculture. What is to take one species of plants and to make a big farm of these, and to put in extinction the other species. So instrumental use of plants, deforestation of the world, even the food ethics. The food alimentary ethics. For instance, we have to remember that always when we are speaking about food, now we have the vegetarian or the veganistic perspective. But even look, when the question is, when you are eating an animal, you are always eating a dead living being or a dead being. It means a dead animal. The animal is dead that you are eating. But when you are eating a plant, it's not always clear that you are eating a dead being. A dead being, because you can cut a part of a tree, you can cut a part of a plant, and you can eat that part. And the plant could be there living in the same situation, or sometimes it's good for the plant to take part of there. So there is new perspective to thinking about alimentary ethics in this situation. Just to finish, it is about creating a philosophy that gives plants a place in the world of thought, just as they give us a place in the world of life that they have created. Thank you so much, Robert, for your can I say your attention. Sorry about my English. I have to improve a lot, but I hope you could understand me in the main ideas of my speech. Thank you so much. I don't know if you want to make a break or to make a question.
Thank you so much, Jelson. It was very interesting and very rich. And so thank you for this hint into your projects, your philosophical projects. As for the break, it's you who is the most tired, I think. So if you need a short break now, or since it's 10 to 12, we have still some half an hour to discuss as you wish. So
this big problem to speak so much. Sorry.
I don't know, but it's on the opposite. It was very interesting.
Yeah, we can go on. We can make a question. I don't know if you have.
Yeah, normally the students and the participants here like to do one session only. So without a break, they are very staccanovisti, as we say. Don't know if there is this expression in Portuguese or in English. So reference to that guy who Soviet Union. So Leandro already has a question.
Let's start, Leandro.
Thank you, Professor Jelson. It's always a pleasure to hear you. From the many classes I've been seeing from you, and there's many different disciplines. I have been...
Last time was about transhumanism, I think.
Yeah, I think yes. Yes, last semester, yes. But even from the other classes, yes. So it's always good to hear you. I just have a comment, like in general, thinking about the last semester. I thought hearing you that if we could compare the situation of animals and plants nowadays, I would say they could be thought in a relation compared to the slavery situation towards human beings, I would say, like, but just as a similar situation, not the same, obviously. In what point? As you mentioned in the last slide, they're not subject of rights. They're not subject of a same or a equal relation of respect from human beings and, animals and plants and etc. of their own will. That is part of what the veganist movement tries to, to impose, that animals should choose, if their freedom, as you said. So this is just a simple comment. And thinking about that, I came into these two other topics. I thought about this political problem when you said like the will of power. It's easy to understand why the Greek chose the city instead of the fields, because the foundation of the economic view is there. So in terms of the growth of the cities and the population and everything, for people who had power or has power, like nowadays, so the economic view that is prevalent, I would say, plants, animals, and even human beings, in my sense, they must continue to be like considered as assets, as objects, as numbers, as employees, as stocks. I don't know. I mean, the current view probably is increasing the desertification, as you said in the beginning. I would say, the point is that there is no space to empower this other life, like giving animals rights, because probably this is not the best interest of the economy or something like that. So I think about a political situation in here. And the second point that was from the last semester is this religious eschatological view of the world that I mean by it's more consistent in the Protestant view, but it's also in the Christian view, the Catholic view, I mean, that is, if the paradise is somewhere else, this place is not the most important place to take care of, because we are here as humans, just passing by and going to somewhere else where God promised us the perfection or something like that. So this very idea that is in the foundation of how the human beings behave is taken to the wrong path, I would say, because there is no problem of having a paradise somewhere else. But if you think deeply in faith, man should take care very strongly of this place to go there, to this new or other paradise. But what we discussed very, brightly last semester is that this eschatological view brings men to don't care about if they throw garbage in the fields, if they kill animals by any means, because all of this landscape, as you said, is not related to human, in the path that humans have conscience and that they are in a superior situation. So I just thought of these 2 points, the political situation and the religious situation, bringing man to a superior condition, and then putting animals and plants and everything else in a relation of, I said slavery, but maybe it's a too strong word, but it's that kind of situation, So the last semester discussion was the impact of what some scientists call the Anthropocene, the marks that the impact of human beings are definitely, now there is no turning back point. Even if we take care of whatever we could, still the environment has its own impacts that are not, we could not come back from that, of the destruction we've already started. So thank you so much. This is all the general framework I was thinking when you were saying all of this. And the last one is just a joke that I was, now I will go to my fridge to have lunch and I will look at the carrots, and I'm not sure how I will think about it, But thank you.
But this is nice. Good. So thank you for your comments, Leandro. It's very nice. I agree. There is this political. I start for the religion. The question of religion. We know that some theology in the past, perhaps now they are changing as well because of Francisco, Papa Francisco, for instance. Pope Francisco have some different. How can I say, some different ways to think about the environment. But I think for me, even if you think about Laudato Si, which is a very important letter document of the church, don't speak about the dignity of animals or plants. I have a project with some group in Portugal, including Alex Vilas-Boas, who is our professor here of theology. And my research there with them is to show that it's necessary to think about who is the habitant of this world, of this house, of this home, this common home. Because always you are speaking about the common home, but you forgot that this is not for the man, because there is some anthropocentric point of view still, there in this argumentation. So I think there is this traditional is very strong. This tradition is very strong between us, and is part of our history of forgetting the plants, for instance. So in this sense, for instance, I always think that when Jesus say this very important and ethical perspective, that you have to love your brothers, you always you don't think that your brothers are the plants, for instance. You don't think about this. You think about the próximo is always another human being, or in the world you don't think that you have to love the dogs or the cats or the other animals, even if you have to think about plants in as object of love. And when you change this perspective of plants, I think this is very important, because the ethical perspective of plants have to end in the end, have to help us to love more the nature, to love in this, not in the this easy perspective, but in the perspective that including to take care of these animals and plants, to take care of them as part of your existence, to recognize that you are part of this. So this is a kind of love. Perhaps Francisco de Assis, who inspired Papa Francisco as well. Francisco de Assis was the first to speak about this in the religion, Catholic tradition, I think. And in the other question, the other comment you bring us was about the political or economic problem, and I agree, completely agree with you. Plants, the perspective, the economic perspective to use plants, the instrumental use of plants is how can I say, construct a very big wall between man and plants. And this is very necessary, because they need to maintain this perspective of plants as an object there, and we are the superior, we are the others, we are the best, and they are the others. It means the object. And this is necessary because I told you for instance, the transgenic perspective to change the life is started with the plants. The plants are object, are passive, are nothing. So we can do everything, because plants have no value, no dignity, no rights, nothing. So maintain this perspective is very good for this system, this economical and political system. That's why I think this kind of issues, and I think that philosophy and we as philosophers, we have a lot to do, a lot to work with these new perspectives, because in the end, we are speaking about a kind of slavery. The word is good. It means we are speaking about some beings, some living beings that we don't know, and that we forgot during our history of philosophy, Western history of philosophy special, and we have to take care of them, because they are, if you think about the deforestation, the desertification, we are speaking about forms of life that are disappearing, that we are lost, we are losing these forms of life. And this is very important, not because perhaps we need the plants for our health or something like this, or food or something like this, but because plants have the dignity of life, the rights to life, to live, because they have a value in the end. So I think this is always we are thinking that how the political system of exploitation of the nature is against the recognize. They don't want to recognize these new perspectives about animals, even about plants. Fonseca.
Thank you very much. It's interesting, this discussion, and at the beginning, also you said I can do something. I would like to say that the Genesis points out that we have the responsibility. That's why we are created at the image and of God. It seems that we are the one who's supposed to take care of everything. But because of our own ambitions and the problem of trying to do all concerning ourselves, this is what we have said, we started destroying, first of all, ourselves. We don't consider, respect even the others. We all think about on our own. This word, it starts whatever when we are seeing now, the wars and the all violence we are now seeing. So when we talk about paradise, we normally think it is a place. No, it's sort of we beginning. That's why Jesus said, the kingdom of God starts from now on ourselves. Even the mandament of loving each other, we start saying, love one another, we love the God. So it means that we misunderstand the meaning of love, the meaning of taking care of ourselves, of the nature itself as a responsibility. When we go for the document Laudato Si, we can have a critical viewpoint. It's a good, but let us start from the way Pope also tries to take the experience of St. Francis. It means that he has included that everything, including the animals, the plants, and the self, an ecological viewpoint. When we go to the chapter of this, he says that even he points out the experience of the Prof, Leonard Boff. Leonard Boff has been discussing this kind of ecology here. So even some fingers for that, Pope Francis has taken some experience of Leonard Boff. So it means that even though it's not clearly written there, but the Pope tries to remember us that when we talk about the common house, the common home, we talk of everything, trying to remember as the experience from the creation, that ourselves, we are as like the God represented to take care of everything. So we sometimes forget it is the responsibility, and we think that everything is about that. So these things is today try to recover, try to remember, try to rebuild all our responsibility. What we have to say is we forgot our own responsibility, and we start destroy even ourselves. The nature response, for example, now we climate change is destroying ourselves. So what I'd like to say is to take our own responsibility and to answer positively, so that we start now leading well with the nature itself, with the animals, with the plants. So this is what I would like to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Fonseca. Perfect. I think this is of course, this is a perspective. There is different perspective, and I believe that even theology biblical studies have new approaches of this problem. I think it's a there is very interesting things. I was thinking about this, for instance, the new interpretation of the Genesis, because of this idea of the man is the Lord of the world, and to be the Lord is to take care of the world and not to destroy the world. This, I think, is very interesting. I was thinking as well about the humanism integral humanism proposed, or I think this is the section proposed by the Pope Francisco, so I think it's good. I was thinking about both as well, and I wondering why liberation theology is now interested in ecology. Do you know? I wrote. I invited Frei Beto to write an article in a book I organized last year, and he wrote precisely about this. And for me, it's interesting because Beto recognized, I think, both as well, that liberation theology, do you know, Leandro, is so interesting to speak about slavery, because liberation theology they are interested in the animals and plants and the ecology, because the nature is the last object of the capitalism. They are the last victim of the capitalism, we can say. And in the case of the plant, we can say that plants are the last victim and the paradigm of victim, because they cannot speak. They cannot speak, so they have no rights, because they are nothing. Different sometimes of the animal, including plants, have nothing. So it's a kind of paradigm to think about the victims of our system of the world, of the capitalism, neoliberalism, and these kind of things. So liberation theology started to speak how to liberate the man, and now they are thinking that the man is part of the world, and to liberate the man, we need to liberate even the animals and even the plants. I think this is very nice, and this is why people like people like Prof started to be so preoccupied with ecology. And Fonseca, one time I recorded a podcast with the question: there is plants in the heaven, there is plants in the paradise, because when you think that there is spirit in the plants, so the question about animals is always theology is always, they are always the theologian. They are always speaking about if the animals goes to the sky, goes to the heaven or not. But when we speak about plants, it's a little more complicated. And there is people speaking about the soul of the plant. I with Jonas, speaking about the spirit of plants, the mind. But there is people speaking about the soul of the plant. So this could be interesting to think in theologian perspective. If plants goes to the heaven, if where God lives, there is plants, or plants are part just of our world. How can I say here, and not the world of God? It could be interesting, interesting discussion for next time.
It is, but when we talk about paradise, it seems that whatever is good is there. But if it's, so it means that what we are asking, all this we have there. So today, so there is a kind of trying to explain that if paradise was supposed to be a place, so whatever is good is there, because all this was created by God. That's why your question is a philosophical way. It can be answered today, even though we misunderstood because of the situation itself. So let us remember that religion was also spread by kind of domination and colonization. So whatever was explained was favoring only the domination itself, the Europe itself. But now when we want to discuss, so we say even in paradise is a part of Africa. Something like that was before, was not conceived. When we talk about paradise, it was something very far. But now we understand that it's better we restart thinking about paradise if it is as a place, even though it's not a place. We talk is whatever is good is there. That's why I'm saying it is a kind of misunderstanding, and it's kind of trying to favor only ourselves as human beings and forgetting whatever is there and is a part of this God's creation.
Perfect, thank you. I think it's Andrea.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you for your lecture. Very interesting. It was full of really inspiring quotation and reasoning. So I was really captured by your speech. I'm so pleased that you quote St. Francis, from Assisi, because actually I'm from near Assisi in Italy.
Oh, good.
And when it happens that someone speak about him, it means a lot. We said, okay. So the question is more, we said, not political as the or theological as we speak about like until now, but more poetical. I want to say, because I think that in your discourses, there was like an implication linked to the fact that maybe we have to understand. We don't have only to overpass the an anthropological paradigm, but we have to understand the man from the point of view of the plant, or we can say maybe we have to understand the plant in the man, within the man. So I quote an expression that I found in a book, an Italian book that is from an Italian writer that is called Elsa Morante, and she speak about the oniric flora. So the fact that the dreams is something that is more linked to the plants than to the man and human as we imagine the human is. So that maybe there is some kind of poetic resonance underneath your discourse. And I think, what do you think about the fact that maybe we have to understand our sensibility in the plant layer, vegetal layer, to understand how can be effective the responsibility? Or I can explain maybe a little better. Maybe I think that our sensibility to the plants and to our layer, our vegetable layer, maybe could help us to enter in the system of responsibility with our world. I don't know if I explained better. Sorry for my English, but yes, this was like my suggestion and my question. Thank you.
Perfect, Andrea. Thank you so much. I'm very happy to hear to hear from you that you are interested in San Francisco as well. It's very nice. And look, this political, poetical perspective is very nice. I think you can find this in Kocha as well, and even in Mancuso, because I have the books of Mancuso. I have 3 in Portuguese. Revolução das Plantas, Incrível Viagem das Plantas, Planta do Mundo. I don't like so much here. I don't use yet so much here because he is so many have so many how can I say, so poetical perspective. His texts are in this sense more poetical than the others. For instance, in that case, Marder is more philosophical because he has some arguments, and Mancuso is more poetical. But I think that even Mancuso and even Marder and Kocha, the 3 that I know more, a little more, they recognize the aesthetic perspective in first the aesthetic perspective to this approach, to go until the plants is necessary to have this aesthetic perspective, and then poetical perspective as well. And I could say metaphoric perspective, because the language is not enough more, I told you, and even the a mythological perspective, because even in Latin America, for instance, Brazil, we have this use of plants for, open new realities. We have this kind of perspectivism of the indigenous people, like, for instance, show us the work of Viveiros de Castro. Always we find that this reference to this use of plants, like I don't know, a kind of psychedelic experience or something like this. Ayahuasca, tobacco. There is this book. Where is the book? It's not here, but there is a book called Plantas Mestras, about how you can learn from plants, using these plants like psychotic or something like this. And this is very, very interesting, and open a new discussion about mythological and the poetical aesthetic experience with the plants. And just to finish my comment is that you have to remember that Jonas as well was not how can I say, was not content, was not realize. He try always say that responsibility is not just intellectual experience, but there is some feeling, some sentimentals in the he wrote the feeling of responsibility. And this is a very interesting perspective against Kant, because Kant is always a formal perspective. The ethical is a formal ethics. And for Jonas, we need to improve and to develop our feelings, to open our not only the intellectual things, but all our, I don't know, poetical, aesthetical experience to make this experience with the nature. I think this is important because responsibility needs this open, this new door, this new horizon. And just finished, there is a book of The Last Children in the Nature. I don't know if you know. Is a North American journalist. He wrote this book. I like this book because he wrote about this feeling, this gap of nature. He spoke about a kind of disease, because there is a disease in the contemporary society because we don't have this experience with nature. So, like Socrates, don't like to he believed that he has nothing to understand, to learn with trees or flowers, but he likes to be there. And our society, our children, they believe that milk is always in a pack, or fruits. They don't have this, for instance, the experience of stations, of seasons. And the seasons, we don't know when is the time for instance, for orange. And the family, they don't teach these things to the children. So children lost everything about nature. They live in small box, protected to the nature, and have no sensibility. So how can you imagine that your children, your son, could take care of the nature if they are so distant of this experience that is part of the static experience? Because you have to remember that statics is sensation in the first sense. It means that we have to have this experience of with the nature, to be open to this experience, and to be open to the responsibility that is there. So I think there is very rich potential to speak about poetical and aesthetical approach with the plants.
Thank you very much. Can you repeat me the title of the last book that you said from the American one? If you have it now. If not, I can email you.
No, the book is The Last Child in the Nature.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
In Portuguese is A Última Criança na Natureza. I'm not sure if the original, because here the book. So this is the book, A Última Criança na Natureza. The author is Richard Louv. Okay. And let's check the naming in English. Is yes, Last Child in the Woods, Saving Our Children from Nature Deficit Disorder. It means that he gave the name of a new disease, a new psychological disorder called Nature Deficit, the deficit of nature. And of course, it's not a book of a special, how can I say, a medical doctor or I don't know, it's a journalist, but it's very interesting because this book open a lot of things and make some new approach of a very rich catalog of information from the sciences,
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. One more question.
I will. Hi, everybody. I'm so sorry I lost your class today. I will have the video afterwards, and I will see it. Even when I heard people here saying that it was very inspiring, so I will certainly hear it another time. And I was just going to make a comment when you are talking about the soul, or the spirit, or psyche, or whatever. When I link this with the text you were talking about in the class on last Tuesday, the author also mentioned a lot of about the soul and made a reference to the Aristotelians. So the soul through the Thomistic view, and because of this, more related to spiritual in a religious way. And well, you know, I work with the history of science, so I always look for the original works of each author. So for me, when I think about Aristotle's soul, is the soul in his work, and not this of the Aristotelians that is changed with the scholastic philosophy. Yeah. So just to comment that I always well, I am very interested in read more. I'm starting a new path in my career as a researcher, because I'm quite interested in Aristotle. And the thing that I most feel impressive in his philosophy of biology is exactly this notion of the soul of living beings, because I think it's the very definition of living beings we can find there. And of course, now reading the texts of your course, mainly, I'm impressed how there are many Aristotles in the street. I mean,
yes.
So just to tell you that you are inspiring me a lot, and I hope to say better and more fruitful words next time. But just to, I think the notion of soul as the trace of living beings is important, is a way to rescue the place of nature, because it links deeply us human animals with the other animals and plants. So yeah.
Perfect, Maria. I agree completely. You have a very strong concept, and I think the father is Aristotle, including if you think I think Roberto agree in the point of view of Jonas, because Jonas recognized in his ontology or his metaphysical is in fact an Aristotelian reinterpretation of this these things. And as you know, the concept of spirit, of mind in Jonas is linked, very influenced by the ideas of Aristotle. And even Michael Marder, you know, Michael Marder in his book has some, in the first part, some reflection about the influence of Aristotle, especially not only the Anima, but the other books, the Pseudo-Aristotles, and even Theophrastus, that are very important, of course, to understand this history of this science of the botanic. And yes, I think it's a big concept, and this is a central concept to understand this perspective, even animal philosophy or vegetal philosophy, because they depend of this link, the link, the fil rouge to understand the life is always the idea of soul or of spirit. I prefer, in the case of Jonas, spirit, just to clean the word of this religion perspective, because in that case, in Jonas, there is no this religion perspective. In the case of the other form of life, then not in the case of human, of course. But in the other forms of life, I prefer mind. It means spirit. And but for instance, Michael Marder has a text called the âme de plante in French. It means the soul of plants, and he speaks about souls. Soul, and I think Koch as well. But always in that case, in that perspective, that you have to be careful to don't understand this word in the religion perspectives, the eternity of soul or something like this. But I think I agree with you. It's a big concept. It's very important for us. So again, thank you, Roberto. Again, all who are here together until now.
Yeah, thank you, Jelson.
You could read or listen more things about this.
Yeah, I think we can end this very interesting class, which was global actually, because there was people from this friend of ours who, Stephen, I don't remember actually. I saw his message. Yes, Stephen from Ghana. So we have Africa as well. So we have Italy. So it's global classes becoming global in the very sense of the term. And so thank you for being with us today. Thank you for your generosity, for your inspiring ideas. I think we will continue discussing in the future. So mais uma etapa. Thank you,
just
Jelson.
Just to finish, I have to say that we are in Brazil. We have a big forest here, and I think our philosophy have to take care and to take in serious this problem of vegetal philosophy, because we are we have this, how can I say, this scenario. We have to be attentive with this. And don't forget that Indonesia and Ghana are the others. Nigeria, Africa are big countries with other big forests. So we have a lot to do in this case. Thank you so much, and see you.
See you. Bye bye to everybody.
Thank you, Jelson.
Ciao.